Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. On today's tutorial, I will demonstrate how to cut and sew this simple A-line dress with puff sleeves. I drafted the patterns for this in a previous tutorial. The link to the pattern drafting tutorial will be above and in the description box below. My name is Ayo, and welcome to 011 Clothing Tutorials. On this channel, I upload DIYs, pattern drafting and sewing tutorials. If you haven't subscribed yet, kindly do so, and do not forget to turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified whenever I upload a new video. So now, let's get right into the tutorial. Thank you! I'll be working with the following items: tape measure, water erasable fabric pencil, a pair of fabric scissors, pins, a long zip, a matching thread, some interfacing, 3 yards of Mikado fabric, 3 yards of lining fabric, the pattern pieces which I drafted in a previous tutorial. These are all the pattern pieces needed to make the dress. I drafted the pattern pieces in a previous tutorial. The link to the pattern drafting tutorial will be above and in the description box below. I will go ahead and cut out all these pattern pieces on my main fabric and also the lining fabric as well. This is the front piece, and I have pinned it to the Mikado fabric. The Mikado fabric has been folded into 2 right sides together. I used half an inch seam allowance all around the pattern except for the side seam and the hem where I used 1 inch seam allowance. I will cut it out. This is the back piece. I used half an inch seam allowance all around the pattern except for the side seam and the hem where I used 1 inch seam allowance. I did not add any seam allowance to the center back because I already have a 1 inch zip allowance at the center back. The Mikado fabric has already been folded into 2 layers right sides together. I will cut it out. These are the back and the front pieces. I will also go ahead to cut them out on the lining fabric as well. The length of the lining fabric will be 2 inches shorter than the Mikado fabric. This is the puff sleeve pattern which I have pinned to the lining fabric. I used half an inch seam allowance all around the pattern except for the side seam where I used 1 inch seam allowance. 2 pieces of this will be cut on fold, so I have folded the fabric into 4 layers. I will cut it out. Next, I will cut out the puff sleeve on the Mikado fabric. 2 pieces of the sleeve will be cut on fold on the Mikado fabric. I'll make the sleeve cut out on the Mikado fabric 1.5 inches longer than the lining fabric. I will cut it out. At this point, I should have folded back the 1.5 inches hemming allowance, but instead I slanted the side seam of the hemming allowance. This will create a little fabric shortage at the side seam, which I will rectify while sewing. I will cut out the sleeve. This is the front piece. I will remove the front pattern from the fabric like this. These are the 2 front pieces cut out on the Mikado fabric. I will place the two lining pieces on top of the two front pieces, right side to right side. The length of the lining should be 2 inches shorter than the Mikado fabric at the hem. As you can see, I have already fused interfacing to the wrong sides of the two front lining pieces at the necklines. I will stitch the necklines in place using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. So now the stitching has been done. As you can see, after stitching, I notched the seam allowances and then I understitched the seam allowances to the necklines of the lining pieces. I will give the necklines a thorough press with my iron. I will now open up the two front pieces like this. I will place the two front pieces together at the center front, right side to right side, fabric to fabric and lining to lining. I will pin them together, making sure that the seam lines at the necklines match up with each other. After pinning, I will take it to my sewing machine and I will stitch it in place using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. Make sure that the seam lines at the necklines match up. This is very important. So now the stitching has been done. As you can see, I will notch this middle part and I will reduce the seam allowance to about 1/4 inch. This will make the center front neckline to relax and lie flat. I will turn it to the right side. The next thing to do is to go ahead and give the neckline a thorough press with a pressing iron. I will also press the center front seam line. This is the back piece. I will remove the back pattern from the fabric like this. I will place the back lining piece on top of the main fabric like this, right side to right side. I will sew the neckline in place using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. I will leave 1 inch opening on the neckline from the center back. I have fused interfacing to the wrong sides of the lining at the neckline. The lining is 2 inches shorter than the main fabric at the hem. I will do the same thing on these two back pieces as well. So now the stitching has been done. As you can see, after stitching, I notched the seam allowances and then I understitched the seam allowances to the neckline of the lining fabric. As you can see, I left 1 inch openings at the center back of the two back pieces on the necklines. This will be used to fix the zip in place. I will now fix the zip to the center back of the two back pieces. First, I will mark the point where I want the zip to end at the center back. I will mark this point on the lining as well. I will now separate the lining pieces from the main fabric pieces like this, with the right sides of the main fabrics together. I will measure and mark 1 inch from the end point of the zip down to the hem of the dress. I will sew it in place. With the right sides of the lining pieces together, I will measure and mark 1 inch from the end point of the zip down to the hem of the dress. I will sew it in place. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see, using 1 inch sewing allowance, and I have pressed it open. Next, I will measure and mark 1 inch zip allowance from the neckline down to the end point of the zip. I will now go ahead and fix the zip in place. The first thing I will do is to change the regular machine foot into a zipper foot. I will open up the zip and I will place it on the fabric with the right side of the zip facing down. I will align the stopper of the zip at the upper part with the top edge of the main fabric. I will sew the zip in place following the guideline that I've already drawn on the fabric. Note that I will only sew on the Mikado fabric. I will sew the lining in place later on. I will change the zipper foot to the other side and I will sew the other side of the zip in place like this. Now that I'm done with sewing the zip, I will pull up the zipper pull. As you can see, I have fixed the zip to the main fabric. With the right sides of the main fabric and the lining fabric together, I will go ahead and sew this 1-inch opening that I left at the center back on the neckline. I will sew it in place. After doing this, I will go ahead and sew the open center back of the lining pieces in place on the stitch line that was used to sew the zip to the main fabric. Right sides should be together. I will change the zipper foot into the regular machine foot. The first thing I will do is to sew this 1-inch opening that I left on the neckline at the center back on the 2 back pieces. After doing this, I can now trim off the excess zipper tape. I will change back to the zipper foot. I will now sew the lining in place like this on the previous stitch line used to sew the zip in place. On this side, I cannot see the previous stitch line, so I will just use my fingers to feel the zipper teeth underneath the fabric, and I will make sure that I'm not sewing on it, but I will sew as close as I can to the zipper teeth. I will move the zipper pull out of the way as I sew along. On this other side, I can see the previous stitch line, so I will sew exactly on the stitch line. So now I have sewn the lining in place, as you can see, and this is what the zip looks like on the right side of the fabric. I will give it a thorough press with my iron. I will now place the front piece on top of the back piece like this, right side to right side. I will open up the shoulders such that right sides are together, fabric to fabric, lining to lining. I will pin the front and the back shoulders together like this, with the neckline seam lines matching up. After pinning, I will take it to my sewing machine and I will stitch it in place using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see, and I've overlocked the raw edges. I will now go ahead and sew the side seams together, right side to right side, fabric to fabric, and lining to lining, using 1 inch sewing allowance. At this point, I have already overlocked the ends of the front and the back lining pieces. With this method of sewing, the lining will be separate from the main fabric. So now the stitching has been done. As you can see, I have sewn the side seams together and I've given the entire dress a thorough press with my pressing iron. I will turn the dress to the wrong side, and as you can see, this is the side seam which I have sewn in place, and I've also overlocked the raw edges of the seam allowance. This is the puff sleeve. I will remove the pattern from the fabric like this. I will notch the middle of the sleeve at the sleeve edge. I will mark the wrong sides of the sleeve pieces. With the right sides of the lining and the main fabric together, I will sew the ends in place using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. I have already notched the middle of the ends, so the midpoints should match up with each other. So now the stitching has been done. As you can see, I will match up the lining and the main fabric at the sleeve edge. I will pin the lining and the main fabric together like this at the sleeve edge. I will match the middle points. I will now fold the sleeve into 2 equal halves like this. I will secure the hem in place with my pins. At the side seam, the lining and the main fabric do not match up. This is because I did not fold back the hemming allowance when I was cutting the side seams at the hem. I will trim off the uneven ends. This will not affect the final sleeve because this is a puff sleeve and a lot of extra fullness has been added to the sleeve already. I will repeat the same thing on the second sleeve as well. The next thing to do is to fix this 1/2 inch wide elastic to the ends of the 2 sleeve pieces. I will double the elastic for more durability. I will sew the elastic in between the seam allowance and I will use a zigzag stitch. I will double the elastic so as to increase the durability of the elastic. I will sew it in place like this using a zigzag stitch. I will stretch out the elastic as I sew along. So now I have fixed the elastic, as you can see on the two sleeve pieces. I will fold the sleeve into two equal halves like this, right side to right side, making sure that the seam lines at the hem match up. The pinning is done fabric to fabric and lining to lining on the two sleeve pieces. After pinning, I will take it to my sewing machine and I will stitch it in place using 1 inch sewing allowance. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see. I will turn the sleeve to the right side. Next, I will sew the main fabric and the lining together all around the sleeve edge, about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see. I have sewn the main fabric and the lining together all around the sleeve edge. I will now go ahead and create pleats at the upper part of the sleeve edge. After pleating, the sleeve edge should be big enough to fit into the armhole of the dress. So now the pleating has been done, as you can see. I will now go ahead and fix these sleeves into the armholes of the dress. So now that has been done, as you can see, I have fixed the sleeves to the armholes of the dress and I've also hemmed the lower part of the dress. If you find this video helpful, do not forget to give it a thumbs up, drop a comment down below, share this video with your friends who are interested in sewing, and do not forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. See you in my next tutorial. Bye and thank you so much for watching.